Dave Thomas is joining us. Dave, you answered our question. 44 games in the AAA Midget Loop. Is that what they play?
That's what they play.
Okay. Things are going to get really interesting. Real interesting there. But it was real interesting in Riderville yesterday. Andrew Harris. We're talking to Arash Madani in hour 2. And Arash is one of those guys. I'm not organized enough to keep receipts. But he remembers saying on this show over a year ago, do you have the clip? Okay, Colson's going to play the clip.
You got it. One last thing. Member of Corey Mace's staff, I'm not saying this is a done deal. Wouldn't surprise me if Andrew Harris is going to be involved in some way there.
Can't make fun of him for that. He was he knew something was going on. I read the story at sportscage.com today. Catch you off guard at all? Not really. Kind of this is a good fit.
Well, it catches me off guard. Again, first, I just want to, I'm hoping everything's okay with Anthony Vitelli, who, of course, was the running backs coach and had to leave due to personal reasons or couldn't commit due to personal reasons. He has a terrific family, so I'm hoping everything is well with Anthony and his crew. But I think it's a great fit when you bring in Andrew Harris, and when you're able to bring in players that have recently retired, it can be a double-edged sword, right? Especially if you've played with guys like, for example, Andrew Harris, his understudy was AJ Ouellette in Toronto. So now he's going to be his coach. So it can be a double-edged sword in that, you do have to establish a relationship where you're the coach and he's the player. But having said that, in speaking with Andrew Harris yesterday, he really seems like he's on the ball and on the mark for that and understands that there has to be that separation. And one of the things that stood out to me was the fact that he was talking about, I wasn't the fastest guy, I wasn't the strongest guy, but I did a lot of things right in my career, including not working out a whole bunch. I did more yoga and more agility stuff, and he hopes to bring that to AJ Ouellette, not only to help him succeed more on the field, but also stay healthy and available on the field. So I think it's a great match. Of course, there's the relationship with Corey Mace when the two of them were in Toronto together, and when Harris was battling injuries late in his career, a lot of times he was kind of a player's coach, like almost a Reggie Dunlop, if you will, without the jacket. So we'll see. I think it's a great fit, and I think that he's going to fit in perfectly with his crew. He's definitely motivated to learn all that he can.
Yeah, and you've seen it, Dave, in all different kinds of sports. You've been covering sports a long time as well. It's not always, and actually it's seldom, that really good athletes, really good players make good coaches. What do you see from Andrew Harris that makes you think he's going to be, a good fit on the coaching side here?
Communication. So he has gone ahead and he's been there, done that. So he's got the resume behind him that he can say, hey, you know what, this is why I have earned your respect and trust in what I'm trying to coach and accomplish. But communication, I think, and again, this is a completely different situation, but how many of us thought that Wayne Gretzky was going to be one of the greatest coaches of all time? Well, the thing with Wayne Gretzky that I would submit is that he wasn't able to communicate what he was able to see, right? Because he had such great vision on the ice. He just couldn't communicate that to his team to allow them to accomplish the same things. I think for Andrew Harris, he's got the communication skills and already a pre-built-in relationship with that Rough Rider running back room, which I think is going to make him succeed.
That's a really good point. And then it takes you back to remembering that, Wayne Gretzky did coach in the NHL. What a fail that was in Arizona. Yeah, just never really worked out. What do you remember about Harris as a player and watching him? Like, he was just kind of one of those guys, right? Like, I even go back to the 80s, and I was thinking yesterday after Maz and I were done, I was like, it was like the Mike Pringle, but Pringle was a little more shifty, wasn't as powerful. So Mike Sellers in Edmonton, like just a tank, like a force. Yeah. What do you remember about Harris?
A couple of things stand out for me. Number one is the fact that he was a trendsetter, right? And the fact that there weren't a lot of full-time halfbacks or running backs, if you want to view it that way, for the Canadian Football League teams to use that were national because the risk was just that high. And he came in, after John Cornish kind of started down that path. And then Andrew Harris, he battled for everything that he got. And again, he had a completely different running style, a different running model. He was such a great blocking back. I felt that he read the game well. And again, as a Rough Rider fan, you just absolutely despised seeing him on the field tearing things up, but you had to respect the job that he did. And the other thing that stands out to me was, again, he kind of mentioned yesterday that I'm not the fastest, not the strongest, but man, he was such an athlete. And I don't know if you remember in your time in Saskatoon, I was calling a game when he was playing with the Vancouver Island Raiders against the Saskatoon Hilltops. And I was trying to dig out the game sheet yesterday from my call that day, but he had almost 300 yards rushing, if memory serves correct. And the one run started at his own 20-yard line. He went all the way to the far side of the football field on the right-hand side. He got stopped. And we're talking stopped by 8 guys. So he turned around, he bubbled back, took 12 yards back and reversed his field all the way the other direction, then went and ran for the touchdown and didn't lose stride, wasn't gassed. I'm like, oh, wow. And that's exactly what the Hilltops at the time thought too.
Yeah, he was something special. It was the old men playing with boys. That's what I remember about him. And then, to each their own. School isn't for everybody. But he never really explored the collegiate side of things, which I always thought was weird.
No, and again, right, it's different pathways for different players. And that was kind of the thing with Andrew Harris. And like I said, he went through the junior ranks, he paid his dues. He was basically a territorial exemption of the BC Lions, if memory serves correct. So again, he walked on, he earned a spot there, and then he became one of the superstars in the league, who I think is probably going to be bound for the Hall of Fame someday, especially when you consider 4 Grey Cup championships. Absolutely.
Canadian. Okay, free agency. Let's go down the list of the key guys that are still pending for the Riders, free agent wise. What's on your list?
Oh, there's a lot of them. I'm curious what's going to happen along the offensive line. Of course, Peter Godber, the center, is a pending free agent. Where does he land? Where does he fall? Of course, he was nicked up near the end of the season last year, tried to play through it. And again, we'll see how Peter ends up. The other one, of course, Marcus Sayles on the defensive side. He came in and he really set the identity in a lot of different ways for the secondary, along with Roland Milligan Jr. You had them playing on opposite sides of the secondary most times. And boy, was he dynamic coming in. Of course, have to wait and see how he factors in. He indicated at the end of last year he would be very open to a return to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. We'll see whether or not that's going to be the case, as again, we start to proceed towards that February 2nd day where teams can make formal offers to pending free agents. That's the first day that they can do that over a span of 7, by the way. And then I think the other one that's intriguing that really no one is talked a lot about is, again, Nelson Lacombe made his first interception for the Saskatchewan Roughriders late in the season. And again, it was one of those long overdue moments, but Nelson Lacombe, to my knowledge, is a pending free agent. Now, I will have to double check that. But again, where does he fall? I know the Riders have already re-signed Jaden Dahlke to a contract extension, and Jaden kind of started the year at safety before switching to more of a support and special teams role after Nelson Lacombe was moved from the corner to safety after, of course, Marcus Sayles was picked up. So those are kind of the intriguing ones to me to see whether or not they're all good people and they all deserve to be paid. We'll just see where it falls.
The Sayles one is so interesting for me because he was kind of, discarded in BC. He comes here, and it's great to see, again, see it in every sport where a player will kind of rekindle his career a bit. Now the Riders give him that chance. He has a good season. They have a good thing going here. I would be shocked if he chases maybe a little bit more somewhere else, because talking to Glenn Suter last week, we all live in Canada. We don't live in Texas or Florida or a state where there's no state tax. A little bit extra when it comes into the old oat bag in Canada, isn't that big of a deal. You kind of want that comfort. You want the chance to win. I would be surprised, and I don't know the guy from a hole in the ground, if he doesn't come back, though.
Well, and you know what? There's a lot to speak to Marcus Sale's character, I would suggest. And the fact that when he was released by BC, in large part, it had to do to salary, right? Like, even though the BC Lions may have completely overshot the salary cap by the end of the year, they were in a salary crunch at the start of the year, long before we even talked about Matthew Betts or Nathan Rourke. Having said that, he came to Saskatchewan and he wasn't, again, his resume, I thought, spoke for itself when he came in, and I was really excited that the Riders had an opportunity to bring him in. And he wasn't upset about not playing the first game. He didn't have an ego. Again, he came in, he just kind of rolled up his sleeves and he went to work. He was such an articulate young man. He'll talk to you about anything that's on his mind. And that first practice, I'll never forget, it was at the University of Regina. The only time the Riders practiced at the U of R this season, there were 90-kilometer-an-hour gusts. And it was absolutely insane that the ball was flying everywhere, but this guy was having the time of his life. And I think that spoke a lot to his personality and how he just clicked right in with that group.
I don't know him, talked to him once, heard him a lot when you were talking to him and when Luke was talking to him and Justin on the shows. He's the kind of guy to me, when I listen to him, that I'm like, this guy's going to be a coach when his career's done.
Oh, I would agree. Absolutely. He is such an intelligent player, and the way he saw things. And again, he never gave away any state secrets, but just listening to him knowledgeably speak about the receivers that he was going to have to cover or the schemes that may be run in front of him. And you know what? He's equally as passionate too, because don't kid yourself. When he made that interception against the BC Lions, he was on cloud 9 because you could just feel that that's, again, just such an emotional release, and the fact that he went from being discarded to having an opportunity to go ahead and make a play. And again, when he comes up with it, you can see the smile on his face from across the stadium in such a big moment. So there's so many positive factors with Marcus Sales, but again, it's one of those situations where you can't keep everyone, even though you'd love to.
You've had a chance to, dissect, I'm sure, the schedule and what's gone on there, and looked at your summer plans, you and the family, and all that. It's awesome that the amount of rest days. Now it varies a bit from top to bottom, right? But that's one thing that's jumping out at me, Dave, and being like, after last year, you were on the plane with the team. And people, it's like, wow, they get to fly everywhere. Like a 3-hour football game, banging bodies, just what that does, like the knees, the back. Then you got to get on a bird, and hey, it's not, extra legroom central here. It's not one of those Arab Emirates first class planes. And then you bolt to Regina, and then there was days that you guys, it must have felt like you were back on that plane 12 hours later.
Well, the one thing that I'll say is that according to the CFLPA survey, again, at least we weren't on the Bombers plane, right?
Yes. Yeah. That old CP Air.
But the end of the day, again, yes, the travel is the travel, but it's just the rest days in between. And the Riders were always going out east. And there was that string, right, where they went from Montreal to Ottawa to Toronto, and they did it every second week over the course of the summer, and they were always coming off a short week, always facing a team that was coming off a bye. And as far as competitive balance is confirmed, or is I guess when it comes to competitive balance, it just didn't make sense. And so now you've eliminated a lot of that, and you look at the Roughriders, and again, there's different people that asked me about my analysis, because I have it at 5.62 rest days per game for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Now, that differs from others. What I did was I based that on including their bye weeks over the entirety of the schedule. So that's where the 5.62 comes in, which is basically on line with everyone else. But they don't have a 4-day turnaround, and they've only got the 1 5-day turnaround. So to me, this is a sensational schedule as far as competition goes for the Roughriders. And I love what they've done with some of the home games too, like as far as only having that one Sunday game being the Labor Day Classic and the one Thursday, which is the season opener.
I was at SportsCage.com just a little while ago. I saw your story on the pro football prospects in the CFL Combine. What can you tell us about that?
Coming on March 21st to 23rd, 3 days of some of the best football players in the nation that are hoping to be called at the CFL draft are going to be in Regina. It's going to be a great opportunity to see some of the up and coming stars. Players like a Joe, for example, attended that last year. So it's an opportunity for the players to come out. They're going to be competing. They're going to be interviewed. And if you go to CFL.ca and check out some of the interviews that were done behind the scenes with the players, like, it's an intense process. Like, I couldn't imagine doing that as a young player or even myself now, but it's going to be really cool, and I'm pretty excited that it's coming to Regina.
Right on. Okay, Dave, thanks so much for taking some time here today, getting everyone up to date on what you know. You watching any of the curling from afar, Kindersley?
A little bit. I know there's a lot of people that are kind of upset about the fact that the championships are happening at the same time in the same venue. But to me, this logistically makes sense. Like, if you watch any of the Grand Slam stuff, they do men and women at the same time at the same venue. Like, it can be done. And I think it's going to be a great week of curling. It's the first time Saskatchewan will ever have 2 entries in the Brier, as of course we've already got Team Mike McEwen headed that direction. So I think it's going to be pretty cool. And how about Josh Bryden, by the way, overseas? He'll be competing for a bronze medal early this morning, or I guess early tomorrow morning, in Italy, representing the University of Regina.
Yeah. Lost to the United States today in a tough one. Got out of that, took some chances early, and just couldn't battle back. That's what you got to do there, though. Yeah, so hopefully a bronze tomorrow for the U of R team, skipped by Josh Bryden. All right, Dave, thanks so much, bud.
Hey, no problems, and thanks for not hanging on, because I'd have thrown the cross-check your way.
No, yeah, it is cross-check season. That is voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders here on 620 CKRM.